In this lesson, we're going to start to take a look at the let function. And if you're familiar with programming terms, then let might be something that's familiar to you. If you're not, don't worry, we're going to take this from a very basic example up to a more complex example. But the main thing that you need to know about let is that it allows us to create variables and use those variables in formulas. Now you might be thinking to yourself, well, why on earth would I want to do that? Well, one of the main advantages of let is that it makes your formula a lot more lightweight, and it also makes it more efficient, particularly if you have a formula where you have the same cell references repeating over and over again. And that's the thing about let, it works on this concept of variables. Now, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's take a look at a really basic example so you can kind of understand where we're at. So on the spreadsheet here, I just have three numbers, 10, 6, and 2. And it might be that I want to perform a calculation on these numbers. So maybe I want to type in equals sum, and I want to add 10 to 6, and then I want to divide them by 2. So we're just using three cell references there. Hit enter, and it gives us our answer of 8. A very basic sum calculation. Now, if you take a look at this in the formula bar, you can see that I've used three cell references. Now, instead of using those cell references, I could set them up as variables and use the variables in the calculation instead. And the way you need to think about variables is it's basically just giving a name to cells. So kind of like a named range in a way. So I could give this cell a name, this cell a name, and this cell a name. That's basically a variable. Now we set this up using the let function. So let's type in let. You can see the arguments name1, name value1, calculation, or name2. So let uses what we call variable pairs. So we define a name and then we give that name a value. And we carry on going defining our names until we want to do a calculation. So let's take our very basic sum example just here. What I could say is that I want to name 10x. Comma, that's the name. I can now assign the value, which is 10. Comma, my next pair, I'm going to name this one y, and the value assigned to y is 6. And the final one, I'm going to name z, and the value assigned to z is 2. So what I've done there is simply give those three numbers, 10, 6, and 2, a name, x, y, or z. And you can name them whatever you like. I'm just using letters just to make this really simple. And it's worth noting that this applies to cell ranges as well, not just individual cells. So if you've got a column of sales totals, you could set up in a let the entire range and call it sales. Once you have your variables set up, you can then replace the values in your calculation. So we're going to do the same sum calculation, but this time we're going to say x plus y, and notice that the variables now appear in IntelliSense. So x plus y, let's close the bracket, divided by z. And then we need to close off our let. So when we hit enter, we should find that we get exactly the same answer because we're effectively doing the exact same calculation. We've just replaced the values with variable names. And that's the basic premise behind a let. And as I said, this is particularly useful if you have the same cell range maybe repeating throughout a formula. You can give it a name and just refer to the name each time, which makes it a lot more efficient for Excel to process. Now, another thing worth noting about let formulas is that there is a very specific layout or way of typing these to make them more readable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag the formula bar down, and I'm just going to show you in general how you would notate this. So we would always have let first of all, Alt, Enter to go onto a new line, and then in general you'd have all of your variable pairs on separate lines. So I'm just pressing Alt, Enter, and then the final line is going to be your calculation. So that's in general how we would lay out this notation to make it easier to read. So with all that said, let's take a look at a more complex example. Now what I want to do here is I want to synchronize the name of this worksheet in cell B1 with the actual tab name. So the tab name says let example, and the title currently says the let function. So I want to add a formula into cell B1, which will change this title if I were to rename the worksheet tab. Now we can do this using a combination of a couple of formulas, cell and mid. Now the cell function will basically output the full folder path of this workbook into a cell. So let's start there. I'm going to go up to the formula bar. Let's type in equals cell. Now there are quite a few options for this first argument of info type. The one that we want in this example is file name, comma, and our reference is just where we want the full folder path to be output to. So I want to output it to cell B1. Now that's all I'm going to do at the moment. Let's hit enter and see what we get. So in cell B1, I now have the full path name, the full file name of where this workbook is located. So this is going through all of the different folder paths. Now, one thing you'll notice about this, and I've got quite a long path name, is that the final thing on the end here is let example. And this is actually the worksheet name. You'll see that it matches what we have in the tab down here. So I want to now add to the formula that I've just created and extract let example, or the worksheet name, from this long path name. Now the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to get the formula to find this closing bracket and then say extract everything after that. So let's go back up to our formula and make some modifications. So what you might think here is that I can just go on to the end, comma, type in mid, but check it out, the first argument of mid is text. Now the text that we want to extract the sheet name from is being generated by this formula just here. So if I wanted to use mid without using let, I'd have to basically copy this, Control C, paste it over here, comma, and then go on to the next argument. And to complete the other arguments of mid, I'd have to paste it in again. So what I find if I'm doing this formula without using let is that I'm kind of repeating the same thing over and over again. Cell, file name, B1, cell, file name, B1. So it's not a particularly efficient formula for Excel to process or for you to type. We could make this a lot simpler by creating a let. So let's delete that out. I'm going to go back to the start of the formula. We're going to type in let, I'm going to open a bracket, Alt, Enter to put it onto a new line. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to set this up as a variable. I'm going to give this a name. So this is similar to what we did in the basic example. We typed in X and said that X referred to 10. Now I'm going to give this formula a name, and I'm just going to call this path name. So I've given the formula a name. I can now simply use the name every time I want to call this formula. So let's go to the end here, comma, Alt, Enter. I can now go into my mid calculation, which is going to allow me to extract the sheet name from that long file name using the mid text function. Now you can see the first argument is text. So the text we're extracting from is being generated by this cell formula. We don't need to type that in because we can now just use path name. So much easier. As start number, well, I'm going to go into a find, and we want to find the closing bracket. Within text, again, if we hadn't have used let, this argument here would have required us to type cell file name B1 yet again for the third time in this formula. But we don't need to do that if we have a let. We can just type in path name. I'm going to close the bracket. Now, if I was to leave this formula like this, it's basically going to extract the closing bracket as well. So we just want to add a +1 on the end there just to move it along one. We're back into our mid, comma, number of characters. Well, we can have 32 characters in a worksheet name, so I'm just going to add 32 on the end. Close the bracket, and there is our formula. Let's close off the let, hit enter, and check out what happens. Can you see that this is now in sync with the worksheet name at the bottom? So if I was to change this just to the let function and hit enter, it automatically updates. So hopefully you can see there a good example of how much more efficient it is to write formulas when you're using the let function and setting up variables.
If you're not a subscriber, click down below to subscribe so you get notified about similar videos we upload. To see the full course that this video came from, click over there. And click over there to see more videos from Simon Says It.